The white lace of her wedding dress seemed to blur and spin as Rebecca Kendall stood at the altar, her knees buckling beneath her, while the preacher's words turned into a distant echo somewhere far beyond the ringing in her ears. She had not eaten in 3 days. It was not by choice, but by necessity. Her father had gambled away what little money they had left, and her stepmother had made it clear that food was reserved for those who contributed to the household, not for daughters who were about to become someone else's burden. The wedding had been arranged quickly, desperately, to a man twice her age whom she had met only once. His name was Herbert Sterling, a wealthy cattle rancher who needed a wife to manage his home and bear his children. Rebecca needed to escape her father's house before her stepmother's cruelty turned deadly. But now, standing in the small church in Fort Stanton, New Mexico Territory, in the summer of 1878, with the afternoon sun streaming through the dusty windows and the entire town watching, Rebecca's body finally gave up its fight. The world tilted sideways and she felt herself falling. Strong arms caught her before she hit the wooden floor. She was barely conscious, but she felt herself being lifted, held against a solid chest that smelled of leather and sage. Through her half-closed eyes, she saw a blur of concerned faces, heard Herbert Sterling's irritated voice saying something about hysterical women and wasted time. Then she was moving, being carried out of the church into the blazing heat of the New Mexico afternoon. "She needs water," a deep voice rumbled above her, and she felt the vibration of it through the chest she was pressed against. "And food. When's the last time anyone fed this girl?" "That's none of your concern, Garrett Williams," Herbert Sterling's voice cut through the murmurs. "Put my bride down. She'll recover in a moment." "Your bride?" The man holding Rebecca stopped walking. "She's half dead from starvation. Look at her. You can see every bone in her shoulders through this dress." Rebecca tried to open her eyes fully, tried to speak, but her body would not cooperate. She felt weightless and heavy all at once, and the darkness kept trying to pull her under. "I said put her down." "No." The single word was spoken quietly, but with such finality that even in her weakened state, Rebecca felt its impact. She managed to crack her eyes open just enough to see her rescuer's face. He was younger than she had thought, perhaps 25 or 26, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. His jaw was set in determination, and his green eyes blazed with something fierce and protective. "You're making a mistake, Williams," Herbert warned. "That's my property you're holding." "She's not property. She's a human being and she's dying. I'm taking her to my ranch. When she's recovered, if she still wants to marry you, she can make that choice herself." Rebecca felt herself being lifted higher, settled more securely in his arms, and then they were moving again. She heard Herbert's protests, heard her father's weak voice saying something about the marriage contract, heard the preacher trying to mediate. But Garrett Williams kept walking, his stride steady and sure, carrying her away from the church, away from the marriage that would have saved her from one nightmare and delivered her into another. She let the darkness take her then, surrendering to unconsciousness with a strange sense of relief. When Rebecca woke, she was lying on a soft bed in a room she did not recognize. The walls were whitewashed adobe, and lace curtains fluttered at the window in a gentle breeze. The light had changed, grown softer, and she realized it must be evening. Her head still felt light, and her stomach was a tight knot of emptiness, but someone had removed her wedding dress and put her in a clean cotton nightgown. Panic seized her for a moment, but then she heard voices from beyond the door, one male and one female. "You cannot keep her here, Garrett. Herbert Sterling has threatened to involve the sheriff. Let him. There's no law that says a man has to let a woman starve to death just because her father sold her off like livestock." You know how these things work. They had a contract. Her father took Sterling's money. Then her father can give the money back. I'll pay it myself if I have to. There was a long silence, and then the woman's voice came again, softer this time. You have a good heart, Mijo, but this could cause you trouble. I know, Rosa, but I could not walk away. You should have seen her, so thin and pale, and Sterling did not even care. He was more concerned about the inconvenience than about her welfare. Rebecca heard footsteps, then the sound of a door closing. She waited, her heart beating fast, uncertain what would happen next. A moment later, there was a soft knock on her door. "Miss Kendall, are you awake?" She cleared her throat, which felt like sandpaper. "Yes." The door opened and Garrett Williams entered, carrying a tray. He had changed from his church clothes into simple work pants and a clean shirt with the sleeves rolled up. In the softer evening light, Rebecca could see him more clearly. He was tall and lean, with the build of a man who worked hard for his living. His face was honest and open, and when he looked at her, there was genuine concern in his eyes. "I brought you some broth," he said, setting the tray on the small table beside the bed. "Rosa says you should start with something light, then work your way up to solid food. Your stomach needs time to adjust." Rebecca pushed herself up to sitting, acutely aware of how weak she felt, how her arms trembled with the effort. Garrett moved to help her, placing pillows behind her back with a gentleness that surprised her. "Thank you," she whispered. "You did not have to do this. I could not leave you there." He picked up the bowl of broth and the spoon. "Can you feed yourself, or do you need help?" The question was asked without any condescension, just practical concern. Rebecca reached for the bowl, but her hands shook so badly that she nearly dropped it. Garrett caught it smoothly, then settled into the chair beside the bed. "No shame in needing help," he said. "You have been through an ordeal." He lifted a spoonful of broth to her lips. It was warm and savory, seasoned with herbs, and when Rebecca tasted it, she nearly wept with relief. She had forgotten what it felt like to have food, real food, offered to her with kindness. "Slowly," Garrett cautioned as she eagerly swallowed. "Rosa warned me that too much too fast will make you sick." He fed her patiently, spoonful by spoonful, waiting between each one to make sure she could keep it down. Rebecca watched him as she ate, trying to understand this stranger who had disrupted his own life to save hers. "Why did you do it?" she asked after she had finished half the bowl. "You do not know me." Garrett set the bowl down and leaned back in his chair, studying her. "My mother died when I was 12, he said quietly. "My father remarried within 6 months, and my stepmother was not a kind woman. She used to withhold meals as punishment, lock me in the cellar for days at a time. I know what it is like to be hungry, to be treated as if you are worth nothing. When I saw you standing at that altar, so pale and thin, with that look in your eyes like a trapped animal, I saw myself. I could not walk away." Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes. "Herbert will make trouble for you. Let him try." Garrett's voice was calm but firm. "I own my ranch outright, and I have friends in this territory. Sterling is rich, but he is not well liked. Too many people know he treats his workers poorly, and that his first wife died under suspicious circumstances." This was news to Rebecca, and it sent a chill down her spine. She died, fell down the stairs, supposedly, but there were bruises on her that did not match the fall. Nothing could be proven, but people talk. He picked up the bowl again. "Try a little more. You need your strength." She accepted another few spoonfuls, her mind reeling. Her father had sold her to a man who might have murdered his first wife. The full weight of what Garrett had saved her from settled over her like a heavy blanket. "I have no way to repay you," she said. "My father took Sterling's money. I have nothing. I am not asking for repayment." Garrett set the empty bowl back on the tray. "When you are strong enough, We will figure out what you want to do. If you want to leave Fort Stanton, I can arrange passage for you somewhere safe. If you want to stay, you can stay here. Rosa, my housekeeper, will act as chaperone so there is no question of impropriety. You would do that. For a stranger. You are not a stranger anymore. He stood, picking up the tray. You are someone who needed help and I was in a position to give it. That is all. Now rest. Tomorrow, if you are feeling better, Rosa will bring you something more substantial to eat. He moved toward the door, but Rebecca called out to him. Garrett, he turned back, and she saw something flicker in his eyes when she used his first name. Thank you, truly. You saved my life today. A slow smile crossed his face, transforming it from merely handsome to something that made her heart skip. Get some rest, Rebecca. We can talk more tomorrow. After he left, Rebecca lay back against the pillows, her mind whirling. She was in a stranger's house, having fled from her own wedding with no money and no prospects. By all rights, she should be terrified. But instead, she felt something she had not felt in years: hope. The next morning, Rebecca woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of fresh bread wafting from somewhere in the house. Her stomach growled urgently, and she was relieved to find that she felt stronger than she had the night before. Someone had brought her clothes while she slept, a simple dress in pale blue cotton that looked well made and clean. She dressed slowly, her muscles protesting, and ventured out of the room. The house was larger than she had expected, with adobe walls and exposed wooden beams. The floors were swept clean, and colorful woven rugs added warmth to the space. She followed the sound of voices and the smell of food to a bright kitchen where an older woman with silver-streaked dark hair was rolling out dough while Garrett sat at her rough-hewn table, drinking coffee. They both looked up when she appeared in the doorway. Miss Kendall, the woman said warmly, wiping her hands on her apron. I am Rosa Martinez. It is good to see you on your feet. Please call me Rebecca. She felt suddenly shy, aware that these people had seen her at her absolute lowest. Come sit. Rosa gestured to the table. I have eggs and bread and fruit. You need to eat. Garrett stood and pulled out a chair for her, and Rebecca sat, overwhelmed by the simple courtesy. At her father's house, she had been expected to serve the meals, not sit and be served. Rosa placed a plate in front of her loaded with scrambled eggs, thick slices of bread still warm from the oven, and fresh peaches. Rebecca's eyes widened. This is too much, she protested. Eat what you can, Garrett said, settling back into his own chair. The rest will keep. Rebecca ate slowly, mindful of Garrett's warning from the night before about making herself sick. The food was delicious, simple but prepared with care, and she felt strength flowing back into her body with each bite. How long have you worked for Garrett? She asked Rosa, wanting to understand this household she had stumbled into. Rosa exchanged a glance with Garrett, and he nodded as if giving her permission to speak freely. I do not work for him exactly, Rosa said. My husband worked on Garrett's father's ranch. When he died in an accident 5 years ago, Garrett's father threw me off the property with nothing. I was living in town, taking in washing, barely surviving. When Garrett inherited the ranch 2 years ago after his father passed, he came and found me. He gave me a home here, a salary, and treated me like family. Rebecca looked at Garrett with new eyes. You seem to make a habit of helping people. He shrugged, looking uncomfortable with the attention. Rosa helped raise me when my stepmother would not. It was the least I could do. Still, Rebecca said softly, not many men would have done the same. The sound of hoofbeats outside interrupted their conversation. Garrett's expression darkened and he stood, moving to the window. It is Sterling, he said, with the sheriff. Rebecca's stomach clenched with fear. What will we do? You will finish your breakfast, Garrett said firmly. I will handle this. But Rebecca stood as well, her chin lifting with a determination she had not known she possessed. "No, this is my situation. I will not hide while you face the consequences of helping me." Something like respect flickered in Garrett's eyes. "All right, but stay behind me." They walked together to the front door. Rebecca could feel her heart pounding, but she kept her spine straight and her head high. Garrett opened the door to reveal Herbert Sterling on his large black horse, with Sheriff Tom Crawford beside him on a dusty mare. Herbert was a large man in his late 40s, with a thick mustache and cold eyes. He looked at Rebecca with an expression that made her skin crawl. "There is my runaway bride," he said. "Rebecca, this foolishness has gone on long enough. Get your things. We are going to complete the ceremony today." "No," Rebecca said, her voice shaking but clear. "I will not marry you. You do not have a choice, girl. Your father signed a contract. I paid good money for you." "She is not property to be bought and sold," Garrett interjected, "and she has the right to refuse marriage." Sheriff Crawford shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. He was a man in his 50s with a weathered face and tired eyes. "Now, Garrett, technically Sterling is right. There was a contract. Rebecca's father did accept payment." "Then I will pay Herbert back his money," Garrett said. "Every cent. Rebecca stays here." Herbert's face reddened with anger. "This is not about the money. I need a wife, and I chose her." "I will not be made a fool of in front of the whole town." "You made yourself a fool," Garrett replied coldly. "A decent man would have noticed his bride was starving. A decent man would have cared. How I treat my property is none of your concern. She is not your property." Garrett's voice rose, his control slipping for the first time. "And she never will be." Rebecca stepped forward, placing a hand on Garrett's arm. She could feel the tension in his muscles, the rage he was barely containing. She looked up at Herbert, and for the first time in her life, she spoke the full truth of her heart to a man who had power over her. "I will not marry you, Herbert Sterling," she said clearly. "Not now, not ever. You may have paid my father, but he had no right to sell me. I am a human being with my own will and my own right to choose my future, and I choose to refuse you." Herbert's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You will regret this, girl. Both of you will regret this." He wheeled his horse around and galloped off, leaving a cloud of dust in his wake. Sheriff Crawford remained, looking uncomfortable. "I am sorry, Garrett," he said, "but this is going to cause problems. Herbert is already talking about pressing charges, claiming you kidnapped Rebecca." "Kidnapped?" Garrett's voice was incredulous. "She fainted from hunger. I brought her here to recover. Ask her yourself if I am holding her against her will." Sheriff Crawford looked at Rebecca. "Is that true, miss? Are you here of your own free will?" "Yes," Rebecca said without hesitation. "Garrett saved my life. I am here because I choose to be." The sheriff sighed. "I believe you, but Herbert is not going to let this go. He has money and influence, and he is angry. You both need to be careful." After the sheriff left, Garrett and Rebecca returned to the kitchen where Rosa was waiting anxiously. "What happened?" she asked. "Sterling is going to make trouble," Garrett said. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration. "I should have expected this." "I am sorry," Rebecca said miserably. "I have brought nothing but problems to your door." Garrett turned to her, his expression softening. "You have brought nothing but yourself, and you are not a problem. Sterling is the problem. Men like him think they can buy and sell people, think they own whatever they pay for. It is wrong, and I will not be part of it." "But what if he presses charges? What if you lose your ranch because of me?" "Then I lose my ranch." Garrett's voice was calm, certain. "Some things are more important than property." Rebecca stared at him, unable to comprehend this kind of principled stance. In her experience, men always chose property and money over people. Her father had certainly made that choice when he sold her to Herbert. "I do not understand you," she whispered. What do not you understand? Why you would risk everything for someone you do not even know?" Garrett was quiet for a long moment, his green eyes searching her face. "Maybe because I wish someone had done the same for me when I was young and trapped. Maybe because it is the right thing to do. Or maybe," he paused and something shifted in his expression, "maybe because from the moment I saw you standing at that altar, looking so brave and so broken at the same time, I could not imagine a world where I did not try to help you." The words hung in the air between them, charged with meaning. Rebecca felt her cheeks warm, felt something flutter in her chest that was entirely different from fear. Rosa cleared her throat delicately. "I will go check on the chickens," she announced, even though they all knew she had fed the chickens hours ago. She disappeared out the back door, leaving them alone. "Rebecca," Garrett said quietly, "I meant what I said yesterday. When you are strong enough, if you want to leave Fort Stanton, I will help you. You are not obligated to stay here just because I helped you. What if I want to stay?" The words came out before Rebecca could stop them, surprising her as much as they seemed to surprise Garrett. "Why would you want to stay? You have no family here, no prospects." "I have no family anywhere that wants me," Rebecca said honestly. "My mother died when I was 10. My father remarried a woman who despised me. He never protected me from her cruelty, and he was willing to sell me to a man who might have killed his first wife. I have no reason to go back to that life." She took a breath, gathering her courage. "But here in one day, I have been shown more kindness than I have known in years. Rosa fed me and gave me clothes. You risked your reputation and your property to save me. If I leave, I will be alone again. If I stay, maybe I can build something new. Maybe I can be useful here." Garrett stepped closer and Rebecca's heart began to race. "You do not owe me service in exchange for help," he said seriously. "I need you to understand that you are not a servant here." "I know." And strangely, she did know. She could see it in his eyes, in the way he had treated her from the moment he caught her falling. "But I want to contribute. I want to earn my place. I am a good cook and I can sew and keep house. I can help Rosa and I can work for my keep. If you will let me stay. If I will let you." Garrett's mouth curved into a slight smile. "Rebecca, you can stay as long as you want. This can be your home if you want it to be." The word home pierced Rebecca's heart like a sweet ache. She had not had a real home in so long. Tears sprang to her eyes and she blinked them back, not wanting to appear weak, but Garrett saw them anyway. "Hey," he said gently, and then he did something that shocked her. He reached out and took her hand in his calloused palm warm against hers. "It is all right to cry. You have been through hell. You are allowed to feel it." That simple permission, that acknowledgement of her pain, broke something open inside Rebecca. The tears came then, and with them, great shaking sobs that seemed to come from the very depths of her soul. She cried for the years of hunger and cruelty, for the mother she had lost, for the father who had betrayed her, for the future she had almost been forced into. And Garrett, this man she had known for less than a day, pulled her into his arms and held her while she cried. He did not shush her or tell her to stop. He just held her, one hand smoothing over her hair in a gentle, soothing rhythm, and let her purge the grief she had been carrying for so long. When the storm finally passed, Rebecca found herself pressed against Garrett's chest, his arms still around her, his heart beating steady beneath her ear. She knew she should step away, should be embarrassed by her display of emotion, but she could not bring herself to move. She felt safe here, sheltered, and she had not felt safe in longer than she could remember. "Better?" Garrett asked softly, and she felt the rumble of his voice through his chest. "Yes," she whispered. "I am sorry. I did not mean to fall apart like that. Do not apologize. You needed it." He loosened his hold enough to look down at her, and their faces were suddenly very close. Rebecca saw him swallow. saw something darken in his eyes. For a moment, she thought he might kiss her, and she realized she wanted him to. But Garrett stepped back, putting proper distance between them, his expression carefully neutral. "You should rest more," he said. "You are still recovering. There is a rocking chair on the front porch with a good view. You can sit there if you like, get some fresh air." Rebecca nodded, trying to ignore the odd sense of disappointment she felt. What had she expected? Garrett was being a gentleman, maintaining propriety. Just because he had helped her did not mean he had any romantic interest in her. She spent the afternoon on the porch, rocking gently and watching the landscape. Garrett's ranch was beautiful, with the wide New Mexico sky stretching endlessly overhead and the distant mountains purple against the horizon. She saw Garrett working with horses in the corral, his movements confident and skilled. He was a good man, she thought. The kind of man she had not known existed outside of stories. Over the next few days, Rebecca grew stronger. True to her word, she began helping Rosa with the household tasks. Rosa was initially resistant, insisting that Rebecca was a guest, but Rebecca persisted, and eventually they fell into an easy partnership. Rebecca discovered she loved cooking, loved the creativity of combining ingredients into something nourishing and delicious. Rosa taught her new techniques and recipes, and they worked together in comfortable companionship. Garrett spent his days working the ranch, but he took his meals with them, and in the evenings they would sit on the porch and talk. Rebecca learned that he was 25, that he had worked as a ranch hand in Texas, before returning to New Mexico when his father died. He spoke little of his childhood, but Rebecca understood that it had been difficult, marked by his stepmother's cruelty and his father's indifference. "Why did you come back if your memories here were so painful?" she asked one evening as they sat watching the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Garrett was quiet for a moment, his fingers drumming against the arm of his chair. "Because I wanted to make it different," he said finally. "I wanted to take the place that held so much pain and turn it into something good. I wanted to prove that I could be better than my father, that I could build something worth having." "And have you?" Rebecca asked. "Built something worth having?" He turned to look at her, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "I am starting to think so," he said quietly. The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Rebecca felt her heart pounding, felt the pull toward him like gravity. But then Rosa called from inside that she needed help with something, and the moment broke. It was like that often over the following weeks. There were moments when Rebecca would look up from her work to find Garrett watching her with an expression that made her pulse race. Times when their hands would brush accidentally, and the contact would send electricity racing up her arm. Conversations that lasted long into the evening, where they shared their dreams and fears and histories, growing closer with each word. But Garrett never crossed the line into anything improper. He was always respectful, always careful to maintain appropriate distance. It was both frustrating and endearing, and Rebecca found herself falling for him a little more each day. She also found herself settling into life on the ranch. She discovered she loved the rhythm of the work, the satisfaction of a clean house and a good meal, the peace of the wide open spaces. For the first time in her life, she felt useful, valued, at peace. But their bubble of contentment could not last forever. It was a hot afternoon in early August when trouble came riding up the path to Garrett's ranch. Rebecca was in the garden, picking vegetables for dinner, when she heard the sound of many horses. She straightened, shading her eyes against the sun, and felt her blood run cold. Herbert Sterling was approaching with 6 men, all armed. Rebecca dropped her basket and ran for the house. "Garrett," she called. "Garrett, they are coming. Garrett emerged from the barn, saw the approaching riders, and his jaw tightened. "Get in the house," he told Rebecca. "Stay with Rosa." "No," Rebecca said. "I will not hide while you face danger because of me. Rebecca, please. These men are armed. All the more reason I should be here. This is about me. Maybe if I speak to Herbert, we can resolve this peacefully." Garrett looked like he wanted to argue, but there was no time. The riders had reached the house. Herbert dismounted, his face hard and cold. "I have been patient, Williams," he said. "I gave you time to reconsider this foolishness, but you have insulted me for the last time. Rebecca, you are coming with me now." "I am not," Rebecca said, her voice steady despite her fear. "I have made my choice. I will not marry you. You signed a contract through your father. My father had no right to sign away my life. I am not property, and I will not be treated as such." Herbert's face reddened with rage. "You are a foolish girl who does not know what is good for her. I am offering you a home, security, a position of respect as my wife. What does Williams offer you? The reputation of a whore, living in sin with a man who is not your husband." Rebecca flinched at the crude language, but Garrett stepped forward, his fists clenched. "Watch your mouth, Sterling," he said dangerously. "Rebecca is under my protection with Rosa as chaperone. There has been nothing improper here. That is not what people in town are saying. The gossip is spreading. Rebecca's reputation is ruined. No decent man will have her now. She might as well marry me." "I would rather die unwed than marry you," Rebecca said clearly. Herbert's eyes flashed with fury. "So be it. If I cannot have you, I will make sure Williams loses everything." He turned to his men. "Burn the barn." "No," Rebecca screamed, but the men were already moving, pulling torches from their saddlebags. Garrett pulled a rifle from behind the door. "You are making a big mistake, Sterling." "Am I? You are outnumbered, Williams. Put down the gun." Everything happened at once. Garrett fired a shot into the air, a warning. The horses spooked, and in the chaos, one of Sterling's men dropped his torch onto the dry grass. The flames spread rapidly, racing toward the barn where Garrett kept his horses. Garrett swore and ran toward the barn, dropping his rifle. Rebecca ran after him, knowing the horses would panic and die if they were not freed. Behind her, she heard Rosa screaming for help, heard the shouts of men trying to control the spreading fire. Inside the barn, the horses were already wild with fear, their eyes rolling white. Garrett began throwing open stall doors, slapping the horses to drive them out to safety. Rebecca grabbed a bridle from the wall and caught one of the panicking mares, leading her firmly toward the door. The smoke was getting thicker and the heat was intense. Rebecca's eyes watered and she coughed, but she kept moving, kept helping Garrett get the horses out. They worked together frantically, and finally the last horse thundered out of the barn to safety. "Get out!" Garrett yelled at Rebecca, pushing her toward the door. A beam creaked ominously overhead. They ran, bursting out of the barn just as part of the roof collapsed behind them. Rebecca's lungs burned and she doubled over, coughing violently. Garrett's arm came around her, supporting her, pulling her away from the burning building. By the time Rebecca could breathe again, Sterling and his men were gone. Rosa and several of Garrett's ranch hands had formed a bucket line from the well, throwing water on the grass to keep the fire from spreading to the house. But the barn was lost. They could only watch as it burned, the flames reaching high into the darkening sky. Garrett stood with his arm still around Rebecca, his face grim as he watched years of work go up in smoke. Rebecca felt tears streaming down her face, tears of guilt and grief and rage. "I am so sorry," she whispered. "This is all my fault." "No," Garrett said firmly. "This is Sterling's fault. He chose to do this out of spite and pride. But if I had not come here, if you had not helped me, Then you would be dead or married to that monster, and I would still have my barn. But I would not have you." He turned to look at her, and in the flickering light of the dying fire, his face was fierce and beautiful. "I would burn 100 barns to keep you safe, Rebecca. Do you understand that?" Rebecca stared up at him, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. "Garrett, I love you," he said, the words rough and urgent. "I know it has only been weeks. I know this is fast and may be crazy, but I do not care. I have loved you since the moment I caught you falling at that altar. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you hum when you are cooking. I love watching you in the garden and hearing you laugh with Rosa. I love everything about you, and I need you to know that before anything else happens." Rebecca could not speak. The words she wanted to say were caught in her throat, trapped by years of learning not to trust, not to hope. But her body knew what her voice could not express. She reached up, cupped Garrett's face in her hands, and kissed him. It was her first real kiss, and it was everything she had dreamed a kiss could be. Garrett's arms came around her, pulling her close, and he kissed her back with a passion that made her dizzy. She tasted smoke and salt and something sweet, felt the rapid beating of his heart against hers, and knew with absolute certainty that this was right. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Garrett rested his forehead against hers. "I love you too," Rebecca whispered. "I think I have loved you since you carried me away from that church. You are the best man I have ever known, and I cannot imagine my life without you in it." "Then marry me," Garrett said. "Not because you need protection or security, but because you want to. Marry me because you love me, and let me spend the rest of my life proving that you made the right choice." "Yes," Rebecca breathed. "Yes, I will marry you." They kissed again, and this time when they broke apart, Rosa was there, tears streaming down her face, her hands clasped in joy. "Finally," she exclaimed. "I was beginning to think you would both be too stubborn to admit your feelings." Rebecca laughed, giddy with happiness despite the destruction around them. "You knew, of course I knew. Everyone with eyes could see it. The way you look at each other, the way you find excuses to be near each other. It was only a matter of time." Sheriff Crawford arrived the next morning with a deputy, summoned by one of the ranch hands who had witnessed the fire. Garrett told him everything, and several of the hands corroborated his story. Sterling had threatened him, and Sterling's men had started the fire that destroyed the barn. "I will talk to Sterling," the sheriff promised. "But I have to be honest with you, Garrett. He's going to claim it was an accident and his men will back him up. Without more proof, I do not know what I can do." "He needs to pay for this," Rebecca said angrily. "He cannot just destroy people's property because he does not get what he wants." "I agree, miss, but the law is not always fair, especially when rich men are involved." The sheriff looked genuinely apologetic. "I will do what I can." After the sheriff left, Garrett set about planning to rebuild. His savings would cover most of the cost, but it would take time. Rebecca threw herself into helping however she could, and over the following weeks, the ranch slowly came back to life. Neighbors and friends came to help raise the new barn, and Rebecca marveled at the community that rallied around Garrett, proof of the respect he had earned. She also learned more about the darker history of the territory. Rosa told her stories of the injustices suffered by Mexican families whose land had been taken through manipulation of American laws they did not understand. Garrett spoke of the treatment of Apache people, driven from their ancestral lands and confined to reservations. Rebecca began to understand that her own suffering, while real, was part of a larger tapestry of injustice that marked this beautiful, brutal territory. "It makes me angry," she told Garrett one evening as they sat on the porch. "How people with power abuse those without it. How they think might makes right." "I know," Garrett said quietly. All we can do is try to be better, to treat people with dignity and fairness. It does not fix the big problems, but it is something. A month after the fire, Rebecca and Garrett were married in the small church in Fort Stanton. It was a simple ceremony, witnessed by Rosa, the sheriff, and a handful of friends from the surrounding ranches. Rebecca wore a dress Rosa had helped her make, pale yellow cotton with lace at the collar, and she carried wildflowers that Garrett had picked for her that morning. When the preacher asked if anyone objected to the union, there was a tense moment of silence. Rebecca half expected Herbert Sterling to burst through the doors, but the moment passed, and the ceremony continued without interruption. When Garrett kissed her as his wife, Rebecca felt the last pieces of her old life fall away. She was no longer the unwanted daughter or the desperate bride. She was Rebecca Williams, married to a man she loved with all her heart, building a life she could be proud of. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and food enough to feed everyone who had helped them rebuild. There was music and dancing and laughter, and as the sun set and the stars came out, Garrett pulled Rebecca into his arms and waltzed her around the yard, both of them laughing breathlessly. "Are you happy?" he asked, his eyes searching hers. "Happier than I have ever been," Rebecca said honestly. "I did not know life could be like this." "This is just the beginning," Garrett promised. "We have a whole lifetime ahead of us." That night, when the guests had gone home and Rosa had discreetly retired to her own cottage, Garrett carried Rebecca over the threshold of their bedroom. He was gentle and patient with her, making her first time sweet and beautiful, and afterward, Rebecca lay in his arms feeling utterly cherished. The months that followed were some of the happiest of Rebecca's life. She and Garrett fell into an easy partnership, working the ranch together, making decisions together, building their life side by side. Rebecca discovered she had a gift for breeding horses, and she began a program that quickly earned them a reputation for quality stock. But their peace was shattered on a cold day in November when Sheriff Crawford rode out to the ranch with grim news. "Herbert Sterling is dead," he said without preamble. Rebecca felt the blood drain from her face. "What happened?" "Thrown from his horse. Broke his neck." "It looks like an accident, but there is some question." The sheriff looked uncomfortable. "The thing is, he changed his will a week before he died, left everything to his nephew, a man named Charles Sterling. And Charles is claiming that you, Rebecca, orchestrated Herbert's death to avoid marrying him." "That is absurd," Garrett exploded. "Rebecca has been here with me every day. How could she have had anything to do with it? I know, and I do not believe the accusation for a second. But Charles is pushing for an investigation, and I have to follow the law. Rebecca, I need you to come into town and give a statement." Rebecca felt numb with shock. Even dead, Herbert Sterling was causing her trouble. The investigation was a nightmare. Charles Sterling produced witnesses who claimed Rebecca had been seen near Herbert's ranch on the day he died, which was a complete fabrication. Garrett hired a lawyer from Santa Fe, and they fought the charges, but it took weeks of stress and uncertainty before Rebecca was finally cleared. The key piece of evidence came from an unexpected source. One of Herbert's own ranch hands, a man named Miguel who had been mistreated by both Herbert and Charles, came forward to testify that he had seen the accident happen. Herbert had been drunk and racing his horse recklessly when the animal stumbled in a prairie dog hole. It was pure accident, nothing more. Miguel also testified that Charles had offered him money to lie about seeing Rebecca in the area, which discredited Charles entirely. The charges were dropped and Rebecca was free, but the experience left her shaken, reminded of how fragile their peace really was. "I keep waiting for something else to go wrong," she confessed to Garrett one night as they lay in bed. "I keep thinking this happiness cannot last." Life will always have challenges, Garrett said, pulling her close. But we will face them together. That is what marriage is. That is what love is. In the spring of 1879, Rebecca discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. She had never known her own mother well enough to learn how to be a mother herself. What if she failed? What if she made the same mistakes her father had made? Garrett sensed her fears and held her while she cried them out. "You are nothing like your father," he assured her. "You are kind and strong and full of love. You are going to be an amazing mother." Rosa was delighted by the news and immediately began preparing for the baby, knitting blankets and sewing tiny clothes. Garrett built a cradle from oak wood, carving it with intricate patterns of horses and mountains. Rebecca's pregnancy was relatively easy, though the heat of the summer was hard to bear. Garrett was endlessly solicitous, making sure she rested, bringing her cool water, rubbing her aching back. When her time came in late September, Rosa and the doctor from town were there, and after 12 hours of labor, Rebecca gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Gabriel, and when Garrett held his son for the first time, Rebecca saw tears streaming down his face. "I am going to be a better father than mine was," he whispered. "I swear it." "I know you will," Rebecca said, exhausted but radiant. "You are already the best father he could ask for." Watching Garrett with Gabriel over the following months filled Rebecca with a love so deep, it sometimes frightened her. Garrett was patient and gentle, changing diapers without complaint, walking the floor with Gabriel when he cried at night, singing to him in a surprisingly good voice. He was the father Rebecca had never had, and seeing him with their son healed something inside her she had not known was broken. Life on the ranch continued its rhythm. The horse breeding program flourished, and they were able to hire more help. Rosa doted on Gabriel as if he were her own grandson, and the little boy thrived under so much love and attention. When Gabriel was 2, Rebecca became pregnant again. This time, she was less afraid, more confident in her abilities as a mother. Their second child, a daughter they named Grace, was born in the spring of 1882. She had Rebecca's dark hair and Garrett's green eyes, and she was the most beautiful thing Rebecca had ever seen. Their family was complete. They had the ranch, they had each other, they had their children. Life was not always easy. There were droughts and hard winters, years when the cattle got sick and money was tight. But they faced everything together, and their love grew stronger with each challenge overcome. One evening when Gabriel was 5 and Grace was 3, the family sat on the porch watching the sunset. Gabriel was playing with a wooden horse Garrett had carved for him, and Grace was nestled in Rebecca's lap, sucking her thumb sleepily. "Tell us the story," Gabriel demanded, as he often did. "Tell us how you met Mama." Garrett and Rebecca exchanged a smile. They had told this story many times, but it never got old. "Well," Garrett began, settling back in his chair, "one day I went to church for a wedding. And there was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, standing at the altar in a white dress." "That was Mama," Grace said knowingly. "That was Mama," Garrett confirmed. "But something was wrong. She was very sick because she had not eaten in a long time. And right there in front of everyone, she started to fall." "And you caught her," Gabriel said excitedly. "I caught her," Garrett agreed. "And I picked her up and carried her away and brought her here and gave her food and a safe place to stay." "And then you fell in love," Gabriel finished. "And then we fell in love," Rebecca said softly, meeting Garrett's eyes over their children's heads. "And we got married and had you and had your sister and lived happily ever after." "Is it really ever after?" Gabriel asked. "The story is still happening." "You are right," Garrett said. "The story is still happening, and it gets better every day." Later, After the children were asleep, Rebecca and Garrett sat on the porch alone, holding hands and listening to the night sounds of the ranch. "You ever think about what would have happened if you had not caught me that day?" Rebecca asked. "No," Garrett said firmly. "I do not waste time on what-ifs. I caught you and you stayed and we built this life together. That is all that matters." "I was so scared that day," Rebecca remembered. "I thought my life was over. I thought I had no choices, no hope. And look at you now. You are the strongest woman I know. You run this ranch as much as I do. You are raising 2 beautiful children. You have built something extraordinary from nothing." Rebecca squeezed his hand. "We built it together. I could not have done any of it without you." "That goes both ways." Garrett lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "You saved me as much as I saved you. Before you came, I was just going through the motions, working the ranch because it was what I knew how to do, but I was not really living. You taught me how to live again, how to love, how to be happy." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. The ranch house behind them was warm and welcoming, filled with the evidence of their life together. In the corral, horses whinnied softly. In the distance, a coyote called to the moon. "I love you," Rebecca said, as she had said 1,000 times before and would say 1,000 times again. "I love you too," Garrett replied. "Today, tomorrow, and all the days after that." Years passed. Gabriel grew into a serious, hard-working boy who loved the horses as much as his parents did. Grace was wild and fearless, always climbing trees and getting into mischief. Rebecca and Garrett added on to the house, built a larger barn, expanded their land. They weathered the bad years and celebrated the good ones. When Gabriel was 12 and Grace was 10, Rosa became ill. She had been slowing down for years, but she refused to stop working entirely, insisting that she would die if she had nothing to do. One morning, she simply did not wake up. She had passed peacefully in her sleep, and while they were grateful she had not suffered, the grief was profound. They buried her on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a view of the mountains she had loved. Rebecca planted wildflowers on her grave, and every year they bloomed in riotous color, a living memorial to the woman who had been family in every way that mattered. The loss of Rosa brought home to Rebecca how precious and fleeting life was. She held her children closer, loved her husband more fiercely, tried to find gratitude in every ordinary moment. She taught Grace and Gabriel to be kind, to stand up for what was right, to treat everyone with dignity regardless of their station in life. When Rebecca was 35, she became pregnant one last time, much to her surprise. She had thought her childbearing years were behind her, but life had one more gift to give them, a son they named Robert, who arrived healthy and loud in the winter of 1889. Gabriel and Grace adored their baby brother, and Robert grew up surrounded by love and laughter. By the time he was 5, Gabriel was 18 and helping run the ranch full-time. Grace was 16 and had developed a talent for training horses that surpassed even her mother's. Rebecca and Garrett watched their children grow with pride and a touch of melancholy. Time was moving so fast. It seemed like only yesterday that Rebecca had fainted at the altar, and now she was a woman in her late 30s with 3 nearly grown children and a life richer than anything she had imagined possible. One evening, Garrett found Rebecca in the garden, pulling weeds in the fading light. He sat down beside her, his movements a bit stiffer than they had been in his youth, but his eyes still bright with love when he looked at her. "You remember what you said to me the day after I brought you here?" he asked. Rebecca sat back on her heels, thinking. "I said a lot of things that day. You said you had no way to repay me, I remember, and you said you were not asking for repayment. I lied." Garrett's eyes crinkled with humor. "You have repaid me every single day for the last 16 years, Every smile, every laugh, every moment of companionship and love. You have given me a family and a home and a reason to wake up in the morning. I am the one in debt, Rebecca. Rebecca reached out and cupped his face, feeling the roughness of his stubble, the familiar planes and angles she knew as well as her own. Then we are even, she said. Because you gave me life when I had none. You gave me hope and love and a future. Everything good in my life started the day you caught me falling. And I will keep catching you, Garrett promised. Every single time you fall for the rest of our lives. They kissed there in the garden as the sun set and the stars came out. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from the ashes of their pasts. The years continued to pass. Gabriel married a kind woman from a neighboring ranch and gave them grandchildren. Grace announced she had no interest in marriage, preferring to dedicate her life to horses and the ranch. And Rebecca and Garrett supported her choice, proud of her independence. Robert showed signs of becoming a scholar, always with his nose in a book, dreaming of attending university in the East. Rebecca and Garrett grew older together, their hair turning gray, their bodies showing the wear of hard work and long years. But their love never diminished. If anything, it deepened, becoming something solid and unshakable, the foundation on which everything else was built. When Rebecca was 52, Garrett woke her one morning with wildflowers, just as he had done on their wedding day. "What is this for?" she asked, delighted. "It has been 25 years since we married," he said. "I wanted to mark the occasion." Rebecca sat up, stunned. Had it really been 25 years? It felt like both a lifetime and no time at all. They spent the day together, riding out to a spot they loved, a meadow with a view of the mountains and a stream running through it. They had a picnic, just the two of them, and talked about their life together, remembering the challenges and the triumphs, the sorrows and the joys. "If you could go back and change anything," Garrett asked, "would you?" Rebecca thought about it seriously. "I would not have wished for my mother to die, or for my father to become the man he became. I would not have wished for the cruelty I experienced. But I would not change the path that led me to you. Every hardship was worth it because it brought me here." "I feel the same way," Garrett said. "I would not wish my childhood on anyone, but it made me who I am, and who I am is yours." As they rode back to the ranch that evening, Rebecca looked at the land they had built together, the home they had created, the family they had raised. She thought about the terrified 19-year-old girl who had stood at an altar, hungry and desperate and hopeless. That girl could never have imagined this future, this abundance of love and purpose. Life had not been perfect. There had been losses and failures, disappointments and heartbreaks. But there had also been so much joy, so much love, so much beauty. And through it all, Garrett had been beside her, her partner and her best friend, the man who had saved her life and then made it worth living. Robert did go east to university, studying law with the dream of fighting the injustices he had grown up hearing about. Gabriel and his wife took over more of the ranch operations, giving Rebecca and Garrett time to rest and enjoy their grandchildren. Grace continued training horses, becoming known throughout the territory for her skill. When Rebecca was 60, she and Garrett took a trip to Santa Fe, leaving the ranch in their children's capable hands. It was the first time they had been away together in years, and they wandered the old city like young lovers, holding hands and marveling at the art and architecture. One evening, they attended a concert in the plaza. As they listened to the music under the stars, Rebecca leaned her head on Garrett's shoulder and felt utterly content. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what? For everything. For catching me when I fell, for giving me a home, for loving me all these years." Garrett kissed the top of her head. "It has been my greatest honor," he said simply. They returned to the ranch refreshed, ready to embrace the next chapter of their lives. Rebecca began writing down her memories, wanting to preserve the story for her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She wrote about the hardships she had faced, the kindness that had saved her, the love that had transformed her. Garrett spent more time teaching his grandchildren about ranching, passing on the skills and knowledge he had accumulated over a lifetime. He was patient and kind with them, just as he had been with his own children, and Rebecca loved watching him with them, seeing the circle of life continue. When Rebecca was 68 and Garrett was 73, they celebrated their 41st wedding anniversary. Their children threw them a party, inviting friends and neighbors from all over the territory. It was a joyous occasion, filled with music and food and laughter. As Rebecca looked around at the people who had filled her life with love, she felt tears of gratitude streaming down her face. Gabriel and his wife, their 4 children. Grace, still fiercely independent, still devoted to her horses and her family. Robert, successful lawyer now working to protect the rights of Mexican and Native families, married to a schoolteacher with 2 daughters. Their grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren running around the yard. All of this had come from one moment of courage, one act of kindness. Garrett had caught her when she fell, and from that single moment, this entire beautiful life had grown. That night, lying in bed with Garrett's arms around her, Rebecca thought about how far she had come. The frightened, hungry girl at the altar was gone, replaced by a woman who had lived fully and loved deeply, who had raised good children and built a legacy of kindness. "I have had a good life," she told Garrett. "We have had a good life," he corrected, "and it is not over yet." He was right. They had several more years together. Years of watching their family grow, of sitting on the porch in the evenings and counting their blessings, of simple pleasures and deep contentment. Garrett passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, with Rebecca holding his hand. The grief was crushing, losing her partner of 46 years, but Rebecca took comfort in knowing that he had lived a good life, that he had been surrounded by love until the very end. She lived another 5 years, cared for by her children, spending her days with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, telling them stories about their grandfather and the life they had built together. On a warm spring evening when Rebecca was 73, she sat on the porch of the ranch house, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and rose. Grace sat beside her, quietly knitting, and several grandchildren played in the yard. Rebecca felt a great wave of peace wash over her. She had lived a long life, a good life. She had known great love and raised fine children. She had overcome hardship and built something lasting. She had no regrets. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars appeared, Rebecca closed her eyes and let out a contented sigh. She thought of Garrett, waiting for her somewhere beyond this world. She thought of Rosa and all the others she had loved and lost. And she smiled, ready to join them, ready to rest after a life well lived. Rebecca passed away that night in her sleep, peacefully and painlessly, surrounded by the love of her family. They buried her beside Garrett on the hill overlooking the ranch, with wildflowers covering both graves. And the ranch they had built together continued, passed down through generations, a testament to the power of kindness and courage and love. The story of how it all began, of the bride who fainted from hunger at the altar and the cowboy who carried her home and fed her first, became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. It was a story of rescue and redemption, of 2 broken people who found each other and built something beautiful from their brokenness. It was a story of the Wild West, of hardship and survival and the fierce determination to make a better life. But most of all, it was a love story, pure and simple, a reminder that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with a single act of compassion, and that love, real love, can transform everything it touches.